Guys, as Richard Dwyer always says, the opinion you should trust should be your own, so just consider the information in this guide a second opinion from me, a complete stranger online. But with that said, Day of Reckoning is coming up this Saturday, and I want to give you my thoughts on each fight on the card, who's going to win, what the method of victory is going to be, everything you need to bet on this show. So let me know your picks in the comments. What are the good bets? What are the bad ones? Let's get into it. Jarrell Miller and Daniel Dubois was the fight that I was most looking forward to on this card until, and it's not that funny, but until I saw Jarrell Miller's fight against Lucas Browne. And I don't mean to be rude, but it looked like two hippopotamuses in the ring together. It honestly did. They were both enormous men. And yes, they had power, but they were also exceptionally slow. And so when I saw that, and then I looked at Miller's two other fights since his comeback from his latest drug test failure, I started to really question whether he can win this fight. Now, I know a lot of you guys in the comments after that video said Daniel Dubois is a quitter, and he has quit twice. But here's the thing. If he fights to the game plan that he should, if he avoids getting walked down by Miller, he doesn't try and back him up behind the jab while standing directly in front of him, Daniel Dubois should win this fight easily because he's just going to be able to outmaneuver Miller in his sleep. Okay, so to be clear, I don't think Daniel Dubois is likely to blast Miller out, and I don't think it's his power that gives him the advantage here because Miller is going to be hard to put down. But I do think if Dubois moves around the ring, Miller is going to tire out just by throwing his punches. Check out my full video for the full breakdown, but the bottom line, Daniel Dubois, I think he still wins this fight, and I think he should win it very comfortably. Okay, so in terms of betting, I would go Dubois minus 340 on the money line if you want to lay a little bit more. That, to me, most likely outcome on this fight. But if you want to be a little bit more interesting, go Dubois by KO, and I think go specific rounds. If you want to go 7-9 plus 550 rounds 10 to 12 plus 850, both of those on Dubois, because I think Jarrell Miller will start to tire out as the fight goes on, and I think there's a very likely possibility or a very distinct possibility that if a KO happens, it's going to be in the later half of the fight once Jarrell is more tired out, because I think it's unlikely that Dubois can stop him early just because of how big and durable he's likely to be. Now, if you want to go for something a little bit more risky but still interesting, I would go and look at Jarrell Miller by knockout in rounds 7 to 9 because the odds for that one plus 1100. That's interesting to me because that's around the same time that Daniel Dubois was stopped by both Joe Joyce and Alexander Usyk. And it's also around the same time that Lucas Browne was stopped by Jarrell Miller. So to me, the round 7 to 9 window, it's probably the most likely period that Miller gets the knockout here if he does, because I think if Dubois survives past that, Miller's going to be very tired out. And I think the likelihood of him getting the KO beyond that point will decrease because he himself is going to be more tired. So I think, to be clear, Dubois to win. I would go Dubois on points in terms of what I think is the most likely outcome. But if you want to bet Dubois by KO in the later rounds, there are some juicy odds on that. But Miller by KO, round 7 to 9, plus 1100 is also interesting to me. So have a look at the odds for this one, guys. But I expect Daniel Dubois to win, and I would stick with Dubois on the money line, minus 340, but maybe lay a little bit more on this one. When I made my pre-fight prediction for Anthony Joshua versus Otto Wallin, I said that AJ was going to be in for an opponent that was basically tailor-made for him here because of the fact that he needs somebody who's quite predictable, who's not going to send anything crazy, basically. And Otto Wallin is that guy. Look at how he fought against Murat Gassiev, and he boxed on the back foot very predictably. 1-2 combinations, very stiff, very robotic. And I think that's exactly what Anthony Joshua needs here. Combine that with the fact that he has Ben Davison in his corner, who also coached Tyson Fury, and who's also going to be familiar with Otto Wallin's game plan, which he used in the Fury fight, which was coming forward, being a little bit more aggressive. So whether Wallin is aggressive or he fights on the back foot like he did against Gassiev, I think Ben Davison, one of the best trainers out there, in my opinion, is going to have Anthony Joshua well prepared. Number one. Number two, because AJ, to me, has a real chip on his shoulder, and I also think he's extremely agitated about having Miller and Wilder on this card. I think he's going to want to prove himself. I think he's also going to potentially come out surprisingly aggressive here, especially if he's a little bit nervous. And I think that increases the likelihood of him actually getting the knockout victory, not just a points victory here. So I think Anthony Joshua to win this fight by knockout is the prediction that I would make. But I would say there's a couple of red flags to look out for here. And specifically, I'm talking about how AJ behaves in fight week and at the press conference. If he looks nervous, if he looks edgy, if he's behaving similar to how he was last time, if he's getting wound up by Miller, if he's getting wound up by Deontay Wilder, that to me makes it more likely AJ gets knocked down himself here, potentially, but also I think it's more likely that he comes out aggressive, really puts it on Otto Wallin, and gets the knockout victory himself. So the red flag I would look out for is if Anthony Joshua, he's acting out of character, he's trying to basically put on this bad boy persona that he sometimes does. He's being a bit more snappy, basically how he was at that first press conference. I think it makes the likelihood of an AJ KO victory more likely, but it also makes the likelihood of Anthony Joshua getting knocked down more likely as well. So I would go Anthony Joshua on the money line, minus 360, bet a little bit more. I'm very confident AJ to win this fight. I could also see AJ by KO, plus 165 to me. That's very enticing odds. Plus 165 AJ by KO. AJ to win in rounds 4 to 6 plus 750, or rounds 7 to 9 plus 550. Both of those are interesting as well. Another one, guys, I don't know how many of you will have seen this, but Anthony Joshua to get knocked down and win the fight, if that happens, and just to win the fight by any means, not necessarily by KO, it could be on points as well. Anthony Joshua knocked down and winning the fight, plus 900. If he comes out and he looks nervous, guys, have a look at that bet. The more nervous, the more agitated, the more bad boy behavior you see from AJ, the more likely it is that he comes out reckless, gets tagged with something. But I do expect if that happens, he gets up and he does go on and win this fight still. So I think plus 900 Anthony Joshua to get knocked down and still win the fight. If he behaves out of character at the press conference, have a look. Otherwise, AJ on the money line is what I would go for, and potentially AJ by knockout. Deontay Wilder against Joseph Parker. To me, it's one of the surest things on the card. I heavily favor Deontay to win this one, and the reason why is because I don't think that Joseph Parker has the skills to avoid getting hit on the outside for 12 rounds, and I don't think, as some people have very eloquently pointed out in the comments, I don't think he has the physical advantages that Tyson Fury did to be able to box on the inside and really put the pressure on Wilder and beat him up physically. So if you say he can't do it on the outside, like I do, at least to avoid getting knocked out over the course of 12 rounds, and I don't think he has the physical tools to do it on the inside, and I don't think Wilder wins the fight on points, well, to me, that makes the most overwhelmingly likely possibility Wilder by KO. So if you look at that, I would stick with the money line here on Wilder by KO, minus 380. But if you also just want to go Wilder to win within rounds 4 to 6, plus 240, or within the first 3 rounds, plus 340, either of those are interesting as well. But to me, I would go on the money line, lay a little bit more, but Deontay Wilder to win this fight by KO, it's one of the biggest certainties on this card, in my opinion. If you want the full explanation, check out my video on that one. Filip Hrgovic against Mark Mori. Guys, to me, this is the most predictable fight on the card. And I'm also going to say right off the bat, I would steer clear, and I'm going to steer clear of betting on this one entirely. Here's why. Filip Hrgovic is going to win the fight. He's got the better pedigree. He's the much better fighter. Let's be clear. Mark Mori, on the other hand, he's got an impressive record on paper, 42 KOs, 36 knockouts. But if you dig just a little bit deeper, you'll notice that he's actually beat the same guy 3 times by KO each time. And each time it was in the first or the second round. Okay, that's number one. Number two, his last 3 opponents had a combined record of 17 wins or rather 17 losses out of 18 fights in their last 18. Okay, so what can you say about that? And then thirdly, put on the tape and you'll see right away why Mark de Mori is a huge underdog in this fight. So unless there's one of the biggest upsets ever, Filip Hrgovic wins this fight, let's be clear. But the reason why I don't like betting on it is because the money line, to me, minus 5,000 Hrgovic, very unattractive. But secondly, there are a few unknown factors that kind of make me a little bit wary of betting on specific outcomes, i.e., Filip is a slow starter, notoriously, and so I don't feel confident betting on him to win by KO in rounds 1 to 3 or rounds 4 to 6. And secondly, because as of the time of this recording, the rounds haven't actually been announced yet, I don't really feel that confident betting on a KO victory at all, because if it turns out that this is a 8-rounder, a 6-rounder, who knows, they might do that in order to shorten this card. If that's the case, then I would not be super confident in betting on Hrgovic to win by KO over, let's say, 6 rounds, just because of the fact that he's a slow starter and he's inconsistent and he sometimes tends to fight down to the level of his opposition. So to be clear, Filip Hrgovic will win this fight. I expect him to win by knockout, but I'm avoiding this one as far as betting goes just because I'm not really happy with the odds and I don't feel super confident in what kind of Filip Hrgovic we're going to see in this fight. Moving on. Frank Sanchez against Junior Fa, moving it along, guys. And a word of caution for anyone who didn't see Frank's last fight, because he fought a journeyman named Scott Alexander. And if you didn't watch this one, you might not have known he actually got rocked in the first round. He was on wobbly legs, and there was a brief moment in that fight where it looked like Frank Sanchez might actually be in trouble of getting knocked out. On top of that, Frank's opposition recently, ever since he fought F.A. Ajagba, has been very poor, okay? So be careful, because to me, if there's going to be an upset on this card, it might potentially be right here in this one. Unfortunately, it's not really because I think Junior Fa is an exceptional fighter. I don't actually rate his boxing skills particularly highly. So why do I think there might be an upset? Well, because Frank Sanchez, in addition to the factors that I just outlined, he's stationary with his footwork, okay? So what that means is he tends to stand in front of his opponent and try and hit them with combinations. And if you watch how Junior Fa fights, and the reason why I don't have, with all respect, a lot of confidence in him, is that he's a big, physically imposing guy, but he doesn't really fight like that. He tends to fight on the back foot very, I would say, cautiously. It doesn't look like he's got a lot of venom behind his punches, and it almost looks like he's just trying to get around the outside of the ring, box at range. He does move, actually, fairly well for a guy his size. I just don't really see him as presenting much of an offensive threat to Frank Sanchez unless he catches him with something, and that's where I see the potential for an upset coming into play here, okay? Because if Junior Fa manages to hit Frank standing in front of him, catch him clean with something, we've seen Scott Alexander rock Frank Sanchez last time out. It's not unthinkable to me, just because of Junior Fa's impressive physical attributes, that he manages to do some damage and somehow actually get a surprise KO. Now, to be clear, I'm picking Frank Sanchez to win this fight. I'm probably favoring him to win by knockout, secondly by points. But Frank Sanchez to win is my prediction, but I wouldn't bet the house on it. I don't think it's absolutely out of the question that Junior Fa can connect with something when Frank Sanchez isn't paying attention, just because of his weight and the weight behind his punches. So in terms of the bets that I would go for this fight, I don't like the money line, because Frank Sanchez is a minus 1,600 favorite, so I don't think there's a ton of value there. I think Frank Sanchez by KO is the most likely outcome, so you could go minus 340 there. But the rounds, as far as I'm aware, have not been announced for this fight. So I would stay away from betting Frank Sanchez by points until we know the number of rounds. But in terms of something, if you want to take a little bit more risk, you could. And I'm not saying it's going to happen, but if you want to take the risk, if you have the money to spend, I do think Junior Fa by KO, TKO, or DQ at plus 1,100 there. To me, that's interesting, okay? So if you want to take a risk on this fight, I don't think it's going to happen, but Frank Sanchez was rocked in his last fight. Junior Fa is a big, physically imposing man, and even though he doesn't present a lot of offensive threat, at plus 1,100, Junior Fa to win by KO, I think that one might be worth a look, guys. Otherwise, I'd go Sanchez by KO, potentially Sanchez by points once we know the number of rounds. Arslanbek Makhmudov against Agit Kabayel. Guys, I think it's very clear to me that this is going to be a brawl because Kabayel is, if nothing else, a very tough man, okay? He's got 15 KOs on his record, but if you look at his last fight, he got hit with something like a 10-punch combination. I mean, it was crazy, and he didn't go down, okay? He was getting bounced against the ropes. He was getting bounced against the other ropes. His legs were gone, but he actually somehow stayed on his feet. And so to me, that makes this fight interesting and a little bit concerning as far as predicting what I would otherwise go for, which is Makhmudov by KO. Because Arslanbek has tremendous power. He's got tremendous speed with his hands. He's very strong. He's very heavy-handed. There's a reason he has 17 KOs in 18 fights. And there's a reason why his last fight in Saudi Arabia didn't last beyond really the first minute of the fight, okay? So the guy is a beast relative to his level of opposition. And he's very much fighting within that level here against Kabayel. Kabayel comes forward. He doesn't have, with all respect to him, the best boxing skills in the world. He uses a 1-2 combination, fairly robotic style, and he just basically tries to get close and slug it out with his opponent. But here's the thing, okay? Makhmudov is very effective in the clinches. He's extremely effective. He pushes his opponent's heads down. He holds them. He's kind of dirty on the inside, to be honest, and he hits a lot on the break, and he hits with rabbit punches. But all of that contributes to him having this tremendous knockout ratio. So I think the most likely outcome in this fight is that Makhmudov hits Kabayel coming off of the break, manages to rock him, jumps forward, unloads combinations, and probably wins this fight via knockout, okay? But like I say, with Agit's toughness, it's not absolutely out of the question that he manages to go the distance in this one, but I do think Makhmudov wins this fight by KO. So in terms of betting, I don't like the money line again here because minus 1,100, to me, it's not enticing odds for Makhmudov to win on the money line, but I will say this. If you want to take a risk and bet a specific rounds, you can get plus 800 on Makhmudov to win in round 3. You can get plus 350 on Makhmudov to win within the first 3 rounds. Both of those, I think, are appealing bets. Or you could just go with Makhmudov to win via KO, minus 390. You'd have to bet a little bit more on that one. But Makhmudov via KO, I think that's how I would go in terms of what's the most likely outcome here. But to me, if you want to take a little bit less risk, but have a little bit less chance of it actually paying off, you could lay less money on Makhmudov to win within the first 3, or at plus 800 to win the fight by KO in the 3rd round. So that's how I'm seeing this one. Makhmudov to win the fight, probably by KO, but I just don't like the money line in this one here, guys. Jai Opetaia is an absolute beast. He's one of my favorite fighters in any division at the moment, certainly within the cruiserweight division. And I have to tell you, I don't mean to disrespect any fighter when I say this, but he is a level above Ellis Zorro here. If you watch both guys, Jai's movement, his speed, his in and out fighting, his power, everything, it's a level above Ellis Zorro at this point in their careers. And Jai Opetaia, he's going to win this fight. He's a beast. I think he's probably going to unify the cruiserweight division. He's the best guy at 200 pounds, and he has this chip on his shoulder that means it's going to be very, very difficult for anybody, I think, to beat him unless they really, really are the top of the hill in this division. So in terms of how this fight will play out, if you look at Ellis Zorro, he's very stiff. He's very robotic. He uses a 1-2 combination. Hey, I think there's a theme here because you'll notice a lot of the fighters who I'm picking to lose this on this card, they fall into the same pattern, okay? Ellis Zorro here, I do think he probably gets knocked out in this fight. One thing I will say, though, he's been very active recently. This will be his 9th fight in the last 2 years, so he's been very active. So avoid the money line here, because even though Jai's going to win at minus 2,500 to me, that's very unattractive. Jai by KO, minus 650. I would, again, probably steer clear of that, even though I think that's the most likely outcome in this fight. But where I think there's interesting value is Jai by KO in round 2 or round 3. Round 2 at plus 1,000 or round 3 plus 800. I think there's a chance Jai really wants to put on a display here with, like I said, a chip on his shoulder, wanting to show that he's the dominant guy and that he's able to get Ellis Zorro out in round 2, round 3. Otherwise, betting on Jai to win within the first 3 rounds plus 300, or in rounds 4 to 6 plus 200. Any of those to me are quite interesting because I think Jai probably wins this one within the first 6 rounds. But Jai to win, and I think he's really one of the top guys in any division right now. It's Lyndon Arthur against Dmitry Bivol. Now, Dmitry Bivol is one of my favorite fighters out there at the moment. And I wish Lyndon Arthur well here, but I don't want to sugarcoat it. Dmitry is going to win this fight, and I think he has an excellent chance to win by KO. Because if you look at Lyndon Arthur's last performance, it was not impressive. He got the stoppage against Brian Suarez, but he also did not look impressive. He was in trouble himself at points in the fight, number one. Number two, Anthony Yarde in the rematch managed to pretty much walk through Lyndon Arthur's power. And that concerns me a lot because even though Bivol is not a power puncher, number one, he's going to want to make a statement here because he's going to want to look good going into that potential fight with Beterbiev. And this is a big stage to do it, especially against an opponent that a lot of people don't know. So Lyndon Arthur, if he can't keep Bivol off him, is going to be in serious jeopardy of getting knocked out in this fight, in my opinion. And I think, in fact, that's what's going to happen here. Now, if you look at Bivol, he doesn't have a lot of knockouts on his resume, but his last 2 performances were against guys that were very, very difficult to get rid of. Canelo Alvarez is a tank in his division. Zurdo Ramirez could fight at heavyweight. The fact that Bivol didn't KO any of those guys, in my opinion, does not indicate he won't be able to do the same, or KO rather, Lyndon Arthur in this fight. So I would bet Bivol. I would bet Bivol to win the fight by KO if you want to be more specific, minus 105. If you don't like the KO, you can go points minus 115 on Bivol. But I would avoid the money line. Minus 2,500 is not attractive odds to me on Bivol unless you want to bet an enormous amount of money. Not appealing to me in the slightest. If you want to be more specific, though, you could go Bivol KO rounds 7 to 9 plus 350 or plus 600 rounds 10 to 12. Interesting to me, but I would probably just stick with Bivol by KO minus 105. I think he can walk through Lyndon Arthur's power, and I think he can probably stop him in a similar way to what Anthony Yarde was able to do. So those are my picks, guys. I hope you found this video helpful. Leave a comment. Let me know what picks you like, what picks to avoid. If you thought it's all garbage, let me know that too. I appreciate you guys for watching. Thank you as always, and I will catch you in the next video.